In the interest of time, we're going to quickly move to our next session, that is strengthening digital sovereignty through sovereign cloud adoption, enabling trusted and scalable DPI. I'd request the moderator for this session, Vishwanath Vaidyanathan from MOSIP, to introduce all the speakers as well. Thank you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Let me invite my panel speakers, Mr. Pete Hurley from Amazon Web Services, Ms. Emily Bennett from UNICC, and Dr. Moise Busogi. Thank you for joining us today. As countries scale digital public infrastructure from digital ID to payments to various registries, cloud has become a key enabler for speed and scale. But DPI is a national infrastructure. Adopting cloud raises important questions about sovereignty, control, and trust. Today's panel looks at how governments can use cloud in a way that is sovereign by design, governance, and real-world implementation. Before I begin, let's have a quick round of introduction.
Thank you very much. So my name is Moise Busogi. I'm from CME. I'm a faculty member at CME Africa, and I lead a DPI lab at CME Africa, which is called Upanzi Network, and this is a network of various institutions, including CME Africa, and we do have a node here in Morocco, one in Senegal, and another one in South Africa. So what we actually do is deploy different DPI and really try to understand the journey that a country need to take to adopt a particular DPI. And we've somehow went through a number of DPI, including MOSIP. And what we do is if a country want to adopt MOSIP, we are somehow ready to answer some of the questions. And for instance, something that was raised in the morning, which was the bias. It's something, when we adopted, we actually saw the bias and we were able to flag it and say what can we do then if we actually need to do something that less bias or maybe without the bias. So that's what we do, and yeah, happy to talk more as the conversation goes on. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily. I work with United Nations International Computing Center, UNICC. We've been around for more than 50 years. Core competencies include scalable compute, including access to cloud resources of all different kinds, including AWS, Google, Microsoft, and we run an OpenStack Cloud, which is an open source project by Linux Foundation. We, for a long time, have been involved in building products. So very often we leverage open source components in order to build products, many of which are scaled for country use, some of which are registered as DPGs. Very often you don't see UNICC's logo because we've been working in collaboration with many partners for many years. But UNICC brings this experience around digitization and scaling, as well as very strong cybersecurity competencies for advising and for supporting maturity in terms of the ecosystems in which solutions are deployed. So really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting.
Thanks, everyone. My name's Pete Hurley. I'm the global lead for digital public infrastructure at AWS, and my role is to support our government customers, of which we have many thousands at both federal, central level, but also down at the local level, to implement and adopt and roll out and maintain both DPGs and DPI, digital public infrastructure. And I need to say I'm from New Zealand, which is 36 hours and 5 flights away. So I think I'm going to take the award for the longest journey.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for making it here. Such a long journey, true. Let's start with a small warm-up question. I believe all of you will work with countries, right? You would have discussed with countries, governments. What do you think is the common misunderstanding countries normally think about digital sovereignty while trying to use cloud to deploy their DPI? Yeah. Yes, Pete, you can start.
So yeah, we have a lot of conversations around digital sovereignty, and I don't see those getting any fewer. I think more and more of those questions coming up now. One thing that is fairly common is what I think is a real false binary between countries who think their options are to use cloud perhaps in another country, or if that's not possible for whatever reason, and there could be many, many reasons, then I'm going to run on my local infrastructure. And it's a real binary. There is not a good awareness, and that's a failing, I think, on our industry, of the wide range of options that countries have, that governments have, on how they can host their workloads. So to give an example, yes, there are big, powerful regions in many countries around the world. There's also smaller, less powerful regions, we call them local zones, in a whole bunch more countries around the world. But ultimately, you can even run cloud infrastructure on your own data centers if that's what you need to do for reasons, whatever the reasons might be. So you can install and run. We have a product called Outposts. All the major cloud providers have a similar offering. And they're a cloud infrastructure that runs on servers and racks inside of your data center. They don't leave your data center. The data doesn't leave your data center. So all the processing and storage of the data remains on-premise, but they have access to the capabilities, the APIs, the services that cloud providers have. So if we look at that range of options, and that's before we even get into hybrid workloads where perhaps the data resides on-premise and the compute and other functions can happen within the cloud, there's a whole range of options, a real matrix of options that countries can have, and yet the conversations often start with a real binary. Oh, cloud in another country, or I'll do it myself. And I think we need to raise the game and help people understand all these options are available. Let's talk about them.
Thank you, Pete. Emily?
Yeah, I think another aspect of that is considerations for operational autonomy, right? Some, as you mentioned, it's a question of data residency, and that's quite important. The other aspect is how you really, if you choose to go cloud, how do you build in that cloud environment to ensure that you have all the flexibility that you need, right? And that's a question of ecosystem development as well, because it has a lot to do with how your ecosystem of implementation partners and their approach to implementing solutions in the cloud. So containerization, landing zone methodology, making sure that you're able to integrate your own identity and access management, making sure that you're able to hold the keys. So just high-level concepts, I think, and education around those aspects. Well, they do end up being on a deeper level of governance, the understanding that having control and having privacy in cloud environments is possible with the right implementation structure.
Thank you. Doctor?
Thank you. Yeah, so one of the misconceptions you hear a lot, like from a DPI lab, for instance, when you talk about different adoption, maybe I will even go beyond cloud sovereignty, but even DPI in general, you talk about open source and people say like, hey, you're being vulnerable. And that basically takes the conversation even further. And then when you even say like, okay, you're going to host your data abroad, and somehow instead of really trying to ask the next question, like where is going to host, what is the architecture, how do I, like who has access to this, who does that, they simply just, confound, like if the data is not in the country, then, that is a problem. And we already understand that the data can actually be in your room and still be, patched, or someone actually access it. So I think the question is typically like, do you really, like, how do you define sovereignty? And oftentimes I feel like that definition there's a lot of misconception on that definition itself. Like what it means to you, like is it your ability to have that flexibility? Is it your ability to really have access that is reliable, that is somehow not affected by different other like laws. Maybe your laws are the one that govern what you do. So that ability to basically be in control is what is really sovereignty. It's not about whether the data is in my backyard, because at the end of the day, like, we are a connected world, and sovereignty need to be, defined from the perspective of, what it means to you as a country, what it means to you for a particular service, and basically I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moise. I'll start with Emily this time. From your experience working with governments on governance and operations of large-scale digital systems, what policies and controls and operating models are most critical to ensure citizens' data remains under national oversight and public trust is maintained when the DPI is in the cloud?
Yeah, thanks. So I think I'll maybe start like a bottom up from the questions, basically like policy, control, operations, but maybe I'll start a little bit reversed.
Yes, works.
Okay. I think we can start with the construct of proper governance, and proper governance comes from, and operations under that governance comes from the establishment of the right teams to be able to work in the DPI ecosystem within the construct of the government. Talk about operational autonomy. It's building some level of understanding and some level of control within the government to be able to manage your ecosystem, right? And to be able to make decisions and to be able to understand the landscape. So the governance aspect from a technical point of view is important, but just as much flowing up into the policy making. And having, there's a lot of different actors in the DPI ecosystem within government, right? It can be really quite diverse in terms of the stakeholders involved. So something that has been advocated by a number of countries is to create a group of stakeholders that can work to orchestrate within the government across implementation of DPI in the foundational DPI. So I think from a governance perspective, that also will help with some aspect of decision-making in terms of operations, particularly when you get into integration and when you get into decision-making from a security point of view. Now, that body may also be quite helpful in advocating from a policy or senior leadership and budgetary point of view. What are the decisions that we need to make and why, right? Oftentimes, the deeply technical conversations, there's that gap, right? So having a body that's composed of stakeholders from different areas also somehow helps harmonize interests and helps advocate within the decision-making areas of government, and moreover, helps guide policy. So these are some high-level kind of construct. When you get then into the practical implementation piece, right? We heard earlier from Uganda about how helpful MOSIP was during the process of guiding a number of different stakeholders in a direction to achieve Uganda's goals, right? Around one DPI, right? Around identity. So that orchestration of ecosystem is also very important. And this is something that UNICC has done in a number of countries, is to say there are a number of different local ecosystem implementation actors. And there are goals for these solutions, for these health and foundational identity solutions. And so how do we bring these actors together to achieve that shared goal, to achieve modularity in the solution, to achieve the possibility that it can be integrated into core DPI or foundational DPI, to be able to qualify as a digital public good, for example. So you have these multiple layers of governance that essentially help support operational autonomy, help support wise decision-making when it comes to implementation practice, and it helps look at that big picture with also having the possibility to get into the deeper details within the streams of the governance. I hope it doesn't seem really complex. I think it has to do a lot with vision. One of the last panelists said there has to be a strong vision. So governance can come from that strong vision, and having this model that helps to support, even to the point of where let's say sectorial solutions are integrated with core DPI, it can be very, very helpful to be able to expand in a way that is a repeatable patterns. It is something that we learn and institutionalize, and we create decision-making processes, and we create further modularity because it's something that the government institution learns how to do in a repeatable way. So, thanks.
Do you also see a local capacity shortage in terms of managing the systems in the long run?
Can be. I think different countries have different contexts, and what local capacity means in the context of a government can be very different. And appetite for engaging private sector and integrating that into the approach, creating a government-owned entity potentially, as has been done in the case of Brazil, or Trinidad and Tobago also has this case, training into the government, the programs that we see here involving MOSIP and universities. So there's a lot of different methodologies in order to create the capacity. I think my personal opinion is training and cultivating talent into the universities is a really wise choice. It's a good piece of the puzzle. So.
Thank you, Emily. To Pete, from the cloud platform and architecture perspective, what does sovereign by design mean in practice for DPI deployments? What are all the key platform capabilities or design patterns government should deliberate from the day one in terms of adoption?
Yes, so sovereign by design, this is a phrase we use at AWS, and I'm glad you've used that. It really talks about the fact that a lot of the way the cloud is architected and the way that people use cloud actually has a huge degree of sovereign control baked into it. So there's to a point made earlier by the good doctor here, there's a range of different interpretations for sovereignty, right? For some countries, they're really interested in where does the data reside? Where is the processing happening? Other countries are interested in lock-in. Do I have lock-in with this? It could be a host, a hosting provider. It could be a software vendor. It could be an SI or a partner. There's lock-in everywhere to some degree for something. Everything has a cost of change associated with it. So understanding what a country's needs are for sovereignty is a really crucial way before we can even start having that conversation. Another one that's just been mentioned, which I think we hear a lot more than I was anticipating, is around talent. Do I have the local talent in my country to be able to look after this thing that we have? Because if I rely on multinational corporations or other countries' people, then I'm not in control. And so I've not got the sovereignty I need. The data could be sitting anywhere, but if it's not my people running it and knowing how to look after it, then I've lost that control that I desire. So there's a lot of different aspects of sovereignty. They're really not just about technical aspects and control. So that's the starting point for that conversation. When we talk about sovereignty by design, and these points will have been raised before, earlier sessions as well, the first point on that is the location. Like, where do you want your data to live? Where do you want it to be processed? And as I've mentioned, we have a lot of options there for how that can be done, right? You have choices, you have control over what those are going to be. So that's the first aspect. That is already there. That's not something new that we've introduced because people started using the word sovereign more frequently. That's always been a core part of the cloud proposition. The second one is around access. So who and what has access to the information that you want to put in there? Data is power. Data is control. DPI data is probably the most sensitive, or amongst the most sensitive aggregated set of data we have as a country. And so it's crucial we know who's got access. Doesn't matter where the data's sitting if anybody can access it or the wrong people can access it. And so the set of controls that you have within a cloud provider for setting policies and profiles and identity access management systems and various guardrails to prevent people accidentally changing permissions or granting new things. These are all sorts of standard cloud capabilities you have for managing access, and even actually getting down to the level of microchips inside of servers that are hosting virtual workloads. These have now been designed in such a way that the data on those chips is completely partitioned from all the orchestration and the hypervisor and the other bits of orchestration that cloud providers provide, such that there is no way for a cloud provider or anybody aside from the government themselves to even access the data that is sitting on side of those chips. Right, so the thinking as to how we solve this is, it's done at many levels, right? From just who are the humans involved down to like what is the chip and how is the data stored within that chip, right? So, and everything in between. So the access stuff is really important. The third bit is encryption, and this is standard. This is not about cloud specifically, but if you are in charge of your data, you have encrypted data, both as you store the data in your databases and your systems, and also data in transit. So as it moves around the system, it is also encrypted. And that's pretty standard. But what it means is that even if somebody finds your data because it went somewhere it shouldn't, they can't do anything with it because the data's encrypted and you have your own keys. And again, even within the encryption space, there's different patterns and models you can do for how do I encrypt my data? Where do the keys for the encryption live? Are they on the same provider? Are they stored physically on premise? There's a range of different options for encryption. But again, these are very standard cloud architectures and principles that have been in place for some time. And the last one, I think this is something that never gets mentioned anywhere enough, is the resiliency of your workloads. Because if you cannot offer your citizens the services they need because your services are not online, then you're not in control at all, right? Your data might be safe for now somewhere, but your services are unavailable, and that is not particularly sovereign in my view as well. So we put a huge degree of emphasis on ensuring that when we are hosting workloads for government customers, we help them understand the resilience they are looking for and making sure that they have ways that they can achieve it, alongside the other aspects I mentioned around the location of the data, the access to that data and information, and making sure it's encrypted all the way through the system as it stands.
Can I add one thing? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, Emily, please.
One of the constructs that we talk about a lot is the decoupling of compute resources with the control plane. And it has a lot to do with Kubernetes infrastructure, but moreover, a lot of the security concepts that you mentioned around key management and such. But I think that's one piece that could be better emphasized, that when set up the right way with the right autonomy and understanding of that control plane and what sits in it, then you can decouple from any one cloud provider. It is possible to move, right? And that's also part of the education of the ecosystem in terms of implementation or guidance from the government that you must implement in this structured way, because it allows that portability factor. And so I think that's one of the things that we've done at UNICC in the AWS infrastructure that we manage and scale, is to be able to give the portability for the workloads that are there in a scalable and structured way. And it's something that we do in UNICC Cloud, which is the OpenStack instance as well, because it's just best practice and builds trust. So, thanks.
Thank you, Emily. Dr. Moise, from your experience helping countries and stakeholders interact with DPI components, with dependency network, experience centers, through this, what do you think that governments commonly underestimate while preparing for DPI? And what kind of approaches that they can use to build confidence through their DPI journey?
Thank you very much. So probably I'll even go back to the first question, which is the misconception. So most of the underestimation comes to those misconceptions. Like, for instance, you assume that, hey, all I need to do is maybe have some servers here and put my data, but are you going to have the connectivity you need? Are you going to have the right access at any place? And so, like, all these things that you haven't thought about and you were just really looking at the talking points, like, I need sovereignty, I need to just have everything here. But I think, like, what we actually talk to them about is, like, why in the first place, what do you want to achieve? Now, if you want to achieve this, because at the end of the day, we are not selling cloud. We are not telling people like, hey, come we have no skin in the game. So we just simply say like, hey, if you can do everything in the way you want and buy server, build data center, and somehow achieve what you want to achieve, that's actually good, good for you, and even like your heart is in the right place. But now, if those options that you were thinking somehow end up like resulting in service delivery that is inadequate for the people, then maybe that's why you came here that's how you start thinking about the cloud services, right? So which kind of, bring down to the question of like, what are my options? When I do this, what do I benefit? What do I lose? And to me, that clarity, like to be able to say like, in all these options, these are the advantages, these are the disadvantages, and be informed the decision you take. I think that's something like very, very useful that our partners usually like. And as an academia, you can always build simulation. You can, like, we deploy, we can say like, hey, what if right now we are supporting hundreds of people? Like, what if you do 1 million people? Is your infrastructure going to support it? Maybe we can help in that, right? So as long as you understand that you are not just taking the cloud for the sake of the cloud, you are actually doing it because there is a particular service, there is a level of quality that you want to bring to your people, then that it's a good beginning of the discussion that leads to somehow understanding, like, then if I'm going to the cloud, all these questions, all these other questions I had about the cloud, how do I mitigate them? Like, how do I pick the right cloud? How can I negotiate the contract and so on? So I think that's the way we see it, and that's probably like a good approach to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have more questions, but I think because of the time constraint, I think we have to wrap up. So what we saw today was not about avoiding cloud, but it's about designing the cloud use on national terms, across architecture, across governance, and across capacity building, right? So that's where we are. So I understand this is an interesting topic. We are also hosting a workshop, which is at 5:15 p.m. today in the meeting room 1. If you have more questions, we can have collaborative discussions there. Thank you. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you. Thank you.